You're listening to the Daily Mishnah Podcast with Benedict.
So we think that the Masechet of Megillah, the tractate of the Scroll of Esther, is about reading the Scroll of Esther. But what we found is that more than half of it is actually about reading from the Torah. And I just wanted to remark that in the middle of the tractate of Megillah in the Gemara offers the opinion that all subsequent interpretations of the sages, all of the later interpretations of the sages were revealed to Moshe, including the reading of the Megillah. In other words, that rabbinic Judaism was somehow, in some mystical way, revealed to Moshe on the mountain. And we've already said that the Megillah, the Scroll of Esther, and the Festival of Purim that it describes is the first festival to take place outside the land of Israel and in diaspora. And it's as if the rabbis are reminding us that there's a single continuum between verbal and written Torah, between early and late Torah, that we can't make any differences. So even though we're in diaspora and we're organizing the life of the synagogue and how we deal with selling a building or with heretics who walk into shul and want to be a Baal Tefillah, even though we're dealing with the day-to-day business of running a shul in diaspora, we're still very conscious of our connections to Torah. And remember, we began the Masechet by remembering Yehoshua ben Nun. We actually began the Masechet going right back to the original conquest of the land. And we're going to finish the Masechet with a discussion about what portions of the Torah and the Tanakh we actually read out loud. As if to say that the Torah is there, but the rabbis actually determine how we deal with and how we read with it. And you remember we finished yesterday on the question of a Torah reader who adulterates the Torah without permission. He substitutes a expression relating to sexual relationships with a Gentile woman instead of a verse in Vayikra, which refers to idolatry. And in that case, we silence him with a rebuke. We do not allow individuals in the synagogue to change the Torah reading. But the rabbis may sometimes take a step towards an exception. They don't change the reading, but they may not read it. And so the last Mishnah begins, Ma'aseh Reuven nikra velo mitargem. The deed of Reuven, this is Reuven's sexual relationship with Bilhah, his father's concubine. Ma'aseh Reuven nikra velo mitargem. We read it out. It's part of the Torah. We have to read it out, but we don't translate it. So we don't, if you like, we don't make it obvious to everybody in the shul what is going on. And that is, of course, because it's embarrassing to Reuven. But Ma'aseh Tamar, the deed of Tamar, now this is Tamar's relationship with her father-in-law Yehuda. The deed of Tamar nikra umitargem. The deed of Tamar is read and is translated. And here, we get a sense here as to the theme here, because the theme is not just about sexual propriety. Both of these stories entail sexual relationships, but the first one is shameful for Reuven, whereas the second one is not shameful for Yehuda. Yehuda, at the end of the story, comes out by doing the right thing. In fact, some people would say, look, it's Yehuda's doing the right thing by Tamar is the preface for his reconciliation with Yosef in the next parsha, and Yehuda's ability to admit that he's wrong is the quality that makes him fit for future kingship. So the deed of Tamar is not shameful for Judah. We read it and we translate it. Ma'aseh Egel Harishon Nikra Umitargem, the first deed of the golden calf. And I think this is the first half of the story up to Vayifen, Vayered Minahar, that just the beginning of the story until the people worship the calf and Moshe is told the story on the mountain and he prays for forgiveness on the mountain and God agrees not to destroy the Jewish people. And it is embarrassing to the Jewish people, but you could say in a national sense, not in a personal sense. Nikra umitargem. It's read and it's translated. Vehasheni. And this is when Moshe comes down from the mountain and he accuses Aaron of having allowed this to take place. Vehasheni nikra velo mitargem. The second is read, but is not translated. As if we're nervous about the shame to Aaron from just Moshe's post-mortem on what happened with the golden calf. Birkat Kohanim Ma'aseh David ve'Amnon lo nikrein velo mitargemin. The blessing of the priests, the stories of David and Amnon are not read or translated. They're neither read nor translated. This is really interesting. Why can't we? Well, I think we can perhaps understand why the stories of David and Amnon are not read or translated. I mean, the story of David is, of course, David and Bathsheba, which is personally embarrassing to David. And Amnon, we're talking about Amnon's rape of Tamar. Both of these are embarrassing to David and Amnon. So we can understand why they're not read or translated. But what is it about Birkat Kohanim? And the commentators do puzzle over this one. Perhaps it's anthropomorphic. Yisa Hashem panav elecha v'chuneka. God will lift up his face towards you and will be gracious to you. Does God really have a face? Maybe that is what's going on in those psukim. It's not quite clear. And by the way, nowadays we do read Birkat Kohanim. So when we come to that portion of the Torah, we absolutely do read. So we're not consistent with the Mishnah, and we'll see in the next example we continue to be inconsistent with it. Ein maftirin b'merkava. We don't conclude with the portion of the chariot as a haftarah. The chariot is the first chapter of Yechezkiel. There, Rabbi Yehuda matir, and Rabbi Yehuda allows it. Now, the first chapter of Yechezkiel is the description of the description of the chariot. It's Yechezkiel's vision of seeing God in his temple. We do actually follow the halakha according to Rabbi Yehuda. We actually read it on the first day of Shavuot. So it's parallel to the giving of the Torah. So we go with Rabbi Yehuda there. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Ein maftirim b'hoda et Yerushalayim. Rabbi Eliezer says, sorry, the translation says Rabbi Eliezer, but it's Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says, we don't make a haftarah of Hoda et Yerushalayim. This is the 16th chapter of Yechezkiel. Actually, I brought it for you. It's quite a powerful chapter. Vahidivar Adonai Elai Lemor, God, the word of the Lord came to me, and then he's saying, Ben Adam Hoda Yerushalayim et Toavoteha. Let Jerusalem know her abominations. And then he goes on to say your origin, your nativity was Canaanite, the Amorite was your father, your mother was a Hittite. We can see perhaps why Rabbi Eliezer doesn't like reading this out as a haftarah. And today we don't read it generally as a haftarah, but there are Geniza fragments that suggest it was once read as a haftarah in essentially in Cairo for the Parsha of Shemot. So again, perhaps here it's not quite clear whether we do or whether we don't go according to Rabbi Eliezer. But what is clear is that we do follow the rabbis in our interpretation of the written text, that we have the written text and we respect the written text, but it's impossible to approach it without the verbal Torah. That's a lesson that Hillel teaches one of his converts, and perhaps that's what's coming out at the end of Tractate Megillah. And we'll close there. Hadran alach Masechet Megillah, vehadrach alan. We'll return to you, Tractate Megillah, and you will return to us. Da'atan alach Masechet Megillah, ve'datach alan. Our mind is on you, Tractate Megillah, and your mind is on us. Lo nitnashei minach Masechet Megillah, ve'lo titnashei minan. We won't forget you, Tractate Megillah, and you will not forget us. Lo ba'alma hadain, ve'lo ba'alma de'ati.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the Daily Mishnah Podcast with Benedict.